Hey, have you been trying to get into ketosis, but it feels like your body just refuses to cooperate? You cut the carbs, you increase the fat, and yet those ketone levels stay frustratingly low. You might be wondering what you're doing wrong, and trust me, you're not alone in this struggle. I'm Dr. Michael Harrison, a nutritionist who helps people balance their blood sugar, improve their metabolic health, and understand their bodies on a deeper level. And if you watched my last video on why some people struggle with fat adaptation, you know I'm all about getting to the root of these issues instead of just throwing generic advice at you. Today I want to talk about getting into ketosis quickly, but more importantly, getting into it the right way. Because here's the thing that nobody really tells you. Most people think ketosis is just about cutting carbs low enough, and boom, you're in. But that's actually the biggest misconception out there, and it's why so many people hit a wall. They're doing the macros right on paper, but their body isn't responding the way it should. And that's incredibly frustrating when you're doing everything by the book. Let me explain why this happens. Your body doesn't flip into ketosis like a light switch. It's more like teaching your metabolism to speak a completely different language. And just like learning a new language, you can't just jump in and expect fluency overnight. There are specific metabolic pathways that need to be activated, enzymes that need to be upregulated, and cellular machinery that needs to be built before your body can efficiently produce and use ketones. When you just slash carbs without addressing these underlying factors, you're basically asking your body to run a marathon when it hasn't even learned to walk yet. The reason most quick ketosis protocols fail is because they ignore three critical factors that determine how fast and how smoothly you transition into ketosis. And I'm going to walk you through each of these factors in detail, because understanding them is the difference between struggling for weeks and sliding into ketosis in just a few days. The first critical factor is your liver's glycogen status and how depleted it actually is. Now, you've probably heard that you need to deplete glycogen to get into ketosis, and that's absolutely true. But here's what most people don't understand. Your liver can store anywhere from 70 to 100 grams of glycogen, and your muscles can store 3 to 5 times that amount. When you eat carbs, both of these stores get filled up. But here's the catch. Your body will only start producing significant amounts of ketones when your liver glycogen drops below a certain threshold, usually around 20 to 30 grams. This is where people make their first mistake. They think cutting carbs to 20 or 30 grams per day is enough, and technically, it should be. But if you're coming from a high-carb diet, your glycogen stores are completely topped off. And depending on your activity level and metabolic rate, it can take anywhere from 2 to 4 days just to burn through those stores while eating low carb. During this time, you're in this metabolic limbo where you don't have enough glucose for energy, but you're not producing enough ketones yet either. This is what people call the keto flu, and it's absolutely miserable. But there's a way to shortcut this process dramatically, and it involves strategically depleting your glycogen stores before you even start your ketogenic diet. Think about it this way. If you're trying to empty a swimming pool, you could wait for it to evaporate slowly, or you could pull the drain plug. Strategic glycogen depletion is like pulling that drain plug. You're actively burning through those stores instead of passively waiting for them to diminish. The second critical factor is your mitochondrial capacity to produce ketones, and this is something almost nobody talks about. Your liver produces ketones in the mitochondria, which are like the power plants of your cells. But here's the thing. If you've been running on glucose for your entire life, your mitochondria are optimized for burning sugar, not for producing ketones. The enzymes responsible for ketone production, specifically the ones involved in beta oxidation and ketogenesis, are sitting there dormant because your body hasn't needed them. When you suddenly switch to a ketogenic diet, Your body has to upregulate these enzymes. It has to increase the expression of genes that code for these enzymes. It has to build more of the cellular machinery needed for fat metabolism. And it has to reprogram your mitochondria to prioritize fat oxidation over glucose oxidation. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for your DNA to be transcribed into RNA, for that RNA to be translated into proteins, and for those proteins to be assembled into functional enzymes. We're talking about a process that typically takes 3 to 7 days at minimum. But again, there are ways to accelerate this process, and it involves sending very strong signals to your body that it needs to prioritize fat metabolism right now. Not next week, not in a few days, but immediately. When you send these signals correctly, you can cut that adaptation period in half or even more. The third critical factor is insulin sensitivity and how quickly your body can lower insulin levels. This is huge, and it's probably the most overlooked aspect of getting into ketosis quickly. Insulin is like the gatekeeper of fat metabolism. When insulin is elevated, it literally blocks the release of fatty acids from your fat cells. It's like having a warehouse full of fuel, but the doors are locked. Your liver wants to make ketones. It has the machinery ready to go, but it can't access the raw materials because insulin is preventing fat from leaving your adipose tissue. Now, when you stop eating carbs, insulin levels do drop, but how quickly they drop depends entirely on your insulin sensitivity. If you're insulin resistant, which unfortunately describes a huge portion of the population, your insulin levels stay elevated for much longer, even without carb intake. Your body is so used to producing high amounts of insulin that it takes time for those levels to come down. And during that time, you're stuck in this metabolic purgatory where you can't burn sugar effectively because you're not eating it. But you also can't access your fat stores because insulin is still too high. This is why some people can get into ketosis in 48 hours, while others take a week or more eating the exact same diet. It's not about willpower or doing it wrong. It's about insulin sensitivity. The good news is there are specific strategies that can improve insulin sensitivity rapidly and help lower those insulin levels much faster than just waiting it out. So now that you understand these 3 critical factors, let me break down exactly how to address each one systematically. This is going to be a step-by-step action plan that takes all of this science and turns it into something you can actually implement starting today. Step 1 is to do a strategic glycogen depletion phase before you even start your ketogenic diet. And I know what you're thinking. This sounds like extra work, and you just want to start the diet and get it over with. But trust me, investing 1 or 2 days in glycogen depletion will save you 3 or 4 days of suffering through the keto flu. It's absolutely worth it. Here's exactly how to do this. The day before you start your ketogenic diet, you're going to have a moderate carb breakfast, maybe some oatmeal with fruit or a couple pieces of whole grain toast. Nothing crazy, just enough to give you energy for what comes next. Then, about an hour after breakfast, you're going to do a high-intensity workout that specifically targets glycogen depletion. This means either a full-body resistance training session with high reps and short rest periods, or a high-intensity interval training session that lasts at least 30 to 40 minutes. The goal here is not to build muscle or improve cardiovascular fitness, although those are nice side effects. The goal is to create an urgent demand for glucose that forces your body to tap into those glycogen stores. When you do high-intensity exercise, your muscles are screaming for energy, and they're pulling glucose out of the bloodstream and out of their own glycogen stores at a rapid rate. Your liver then has to release its glycogen to keep blood sugar stable. This is exactly what we want. After this workout, and this is crucial, you're going to eat a very low-carb, moderate protein, high-fat meal. Something like a big salad with olive oil and avocado and some salmon or chicken. The reason we keep protein moderate is because excess protein can be converted to glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis, which would partially refill those glycogen stores we just worked so hard to deplete. We want to give your body enough protein to recover from the workout, but not so much that it can replenish glycogen significantly. Then, for the rest of that day and into the evening, you're going to continue eating very low carb. Another meal similar to lunch, maybe some nuts as a snack, and plenty of water. By the time you go to bed, your glycogen stores should be substantially depleted, maybe down to 30 or 40% of capacity. Then, and this is where it gets interesting, you're going to do a morning workout the next day in a fasted state before you eat anything. This morning workout doesn't need to be as intense as the previous day, but it should be at least 20 to 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. Maybe a brisk walk or light jog, or some body weight exercises. The key is that you're doing this on empty, with already depleted glycogen stores. This pushes your body over the edge and forces it to start ramping up fat oxidation and ketone production, because it simply doesn't have enough glycogen left to rely on. After this fasted workout, that's when you eat your first true ketogenic meal. High fat, moderate protein, very low carb. And because your glycogen stores are already depleted, your body doesn't have to spend the next 3 days burning through them. It can start shifting into ketosis almost immediately. Most people who follow this protocol will see measurable ketones in their blood or breath within 24 to 36 hours, compared to the typical 3 to 5 days it takes without glycogen depletion. Step 2 is to use medium-chain triglycerides to kickstart ketone production while your body is still building up its fat-burning machinery. MCT oil is like training wheels for ketosis. Medium-chain triglycerides are a special type of fat that your body processes differently than regular dietary fats. Normal fats, the long-chain triglycerides that make up most of the fat in your diet, have to go through a complex process of digestion, absorption, packaging into special particles, transport through the lymphatic system, and then finally delivery to the liver. It's a slow process, but MCTs bypass almost all of that. They're absorbed directly into the bloodstream from your intestines and go straight to your liver. And here's the amazing part. Your liver preferentially converts MCTs into ketones, even if you're not fully fat adapted yet. It's almost automatic. When MCTs hit your liver, they're shuttled directly into the mitochondria and turned into ketones through a process that doesn't require the same enzymatic machinery that regular fat metabolism does. This means you can artificially boost your ketone levels within hours of consuming MCT oil, even on day 1 or 2 of your ketogenic diet when your body hasn't fully adapted yet. And this serves 2 important purposes. First, it gives your brain and body an immediate source of ketones for energy, which dramatically reduces the symptoms of the keto flu. Instead of feeling foggy and exhausted because you don't have enough glucose or ketones, you have these exogenous ketones from the MCT oil to fill that gap. Second, and this is really clever, having elevated ketones in your blood sends a signal to your body that ketone metabolism is important right now. It's like showing your body the future state you want it to achieve. This can actually accelerate the upregulation of the enzymes and cellular machinery needed for endogenous ketone production. Your body essentially says, "Oh, we're at a high ketone environment now. We better optimize for using and producing these molecules." Now, here's how to use MCT oil correctly, because a lot of people mess this up. Start with just 1 teaspoon per day, mixed into coffee or a smoothie, or just taken straight if you're brave. MCT oil can cause digestive distress if you're not used to it, so you need to ease into it. After 2 or 3 days, if you're tolerating it well, increase to 1 tablespoon per day, split into 2 doses. Morning and early afternoon are ideal times. You can go up to 2 or even 3 tablespoons per day if you want maximum ketone boosting effects. But I'd recommend staying at 1 tablespoon for at least a week before increasing further. And pay attention to your digestion. If you experience any cramping or loose stools, that's a sign to back off on the dose. The goal is to support ketosis, not to wreck your digestive system. One more thing about MCT oil. There are different types. C8 and C10 are the most ketogenic forms, with C8 being the most potent. If you can find pure C8 MCT oil, that's ideal. It's a bit more expensive, but it produces more ketones per gram than mixed MCT oils. If pure C8 isn't available, a mix of C8 and C10 is the next best thing. Avoid products that contain significant amounts of C12, which is less ketogenic and behaves more like regular dietary fat. Step 3 is to implement strategic fasting to lower insulin levels rapidly and force your body to access fat stores. Now, I know fasting can be intimidating, especially if you're already feeling low energy from cutting carbs. But the fasting protocol I'm going to recommend is specifically designed to be manageable, while still delivering powerful metabolic benefits. For the first 3 days of your ketogenic diet, after you've done that initial glycogen depletion, you're going to use a compressed eating window of 6 to 8 hours. This is often called time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Basically, you're going to eat all your food for the day within a 6 to 8 hour window and fast for the remaining 16 to 18 hours. The easiest way to do this is to skip breakfast and have your first meal around noon or 1 p.m. Then have your last meal by 6 or 7 p.m. During the fasting period, which is mostly overnight while you sleep plus the morning, you can have water, black coffee, or plain tea. The coffee can actually help because caffeine increases fat oxidation and can slightly boost ketone production. Plus, it helps with appetite suppression during the fasting window. Here's why this works so well. Every time you eat, even on a ketogenic diet, insulin rises. Not as much as it would with carbs, but it still rises in response to protein and to a lesser extent, fat. When insulin is elevated, fat burning is partially suppressed. By condensing your eating into a shorter window, you're giving your body longer periods where insulin is at baseline levels. During these low insulin periods, your fat cells freely release fatty acids. Your liver has full access to these fatty acids for ketone production, and your cells can ramp up fat oxidation without any interference. The 16 to 18 hour fasting window also creates a mild caloric deficit naturally, which further depletes any remaining glycogen and forces your body to rely on fat. And because most of this fasting happens overnight while you sleep, it's actually much easier than it sounds. You're really only skipping breakfast and maybe dealing with a few hours of mild hunger in the morning. After the first 3 days, once you're solidly in ketosis, you can extend your eating window if you want. Maybe go to 8 or 10 hours instead of 6 to 8. Or you can maintain the time-restricted eating if it's working for you. Some people find that they actually prefer eating in a compressed window once they're fat adapted because they don't experience the same hunger signals they used to. One important note about fasting during this transition period. Make sure you're getting enough electrolytes, especially sodium, potassium, and magnesium. When insulin drops and you're depleting glycogen, your body releases a lot of water and electrolytes along with it. This is actually one of the main causes of the keto flu. It's essentially dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. So drink plenty of water, salt your food generously, and consider supplementing with magnesium and potassium if you're experiencing muscle cramps or fatigue. Step 4 is to prioritize protein intake at the right level to support muscle maintenance and metabolic function without ticking yourself out of ketosis. This is a controversial topic in the keto community because there's a lot of confusion about how much protein is too much. Some people are terrified of eating protein because they've heard it converts to glucose and ruins ketosis. Other people eat way too much protein, thinking that more is always better. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and it depends on your individual factors. Protein is essential during the transition into ketosis for several reasons. First, when your body is adapting to use fat and ketones, there's a brief period where it might catabolize some muscle tissue for amino acids. This is especially true if you're restricting calories or doing a lot of exercise. Adequate protein intake prevents this muscle loss and ensures you're burning fat, not muscle. Second, protein has the highest thermic effect of all macronutrients, meaning your body burns more calories digesting and processing protein than it does with fat or carbs. This can actually help accelerate fat loss and improve insulin sensitivity. Third, protein is crucial for building and maintaining the enzymes and cellular machinery involved in ketone production and fat metabolism. Remember, these are proteins we're talking about, and they're made from amino acids that come from dietary protein. So how much protein should you eat? For most people, I recommend 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. So, if you're 150 pounds with 25% body fat, that's 112 pounds of lean mass, which means you'd want 80 to 112 grams of protein per day. If you're very active or doing resistance training regularly, aim for the higher end of that range. If you're more sedentary, the lower end is fine. Now, about that concern with protein converting to glucose. Yes, gluconeogenesis happens, and your body can make glucose from amino acids, but this is a demand-driven process, not a supply-driven one. Your body makes glucose from protein when it needs glucose, not just because protein is available. And the amount of glucose that can be produced from typical protein intake is fairly modest and doesn't significantly impact ketone production for most people. The exception would be if you're eating extremely high amounts of protein, like 150 to 200 grams per day, when you only need 80. That excess could potentially interfere with deep ketosis. The key is to spread your protein intake across your meals within your eating window. So if you're eating 2 meals in a 6-hour window and you need 90 grams of protein, that's 45 grams per meal. This might look like 6 ounces of chicken or fish or beef, along with some eggs or cheese. The goal is to get adequate protein for your needs without going overboard. Step 5 is to include specific micronutrients and supplements that support mitochondrial function and accelerate fat adaptation. This is where we can really optimize the biochemical pathways involved in ketosis and give your body every advantage possible. While you can certainly get into ketosis without any supplements, the right ones can make the process faster and smoother. The first supplement I recommend is magnesium, specifically magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, including many of the reactions in the electron transport chain in your mitochondria. This is where ATP, your cellular energy currency, is produced. When you're transitioning to fat burning, your mitochondria are working overtime, and they need adequate magnesium to function optimally. Most people are already deficient in magnesium, even on a regular diet, and the extra water loss during ketosis makes this worse. I recommend 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium per day, taken in the evening, as it can have a calming effect and help with sleep. The second supplement is sodium, but not in pill form. Just good old-fashioned salt. As I mentioned earlier, when you start a ketogenic diet, insulin drops, and your kidneys respond by excreting more sodium. This is actually the main reason you lose so much water weight in the first week of keto. It's mostly water that was being retained by higher sodium levels. But if you don't replace this sodium, you'll feel terrible. Headaches, fatigue, dizziness, these are all signs of sodium deficiency. I recommend adding an extra 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt to your food throughout the day. This sounds like a lot, and it might be more than you're used to, but it's necessary during the transition period. You can back off on the salt once you're fully adapted if you want. The third supplement is omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA from fish oil or algae oil. Omega-3s are incorporated into cell membranes throughout your body, including the membranes of your mitochondria. They make these membranes more flexible and improve the function of the proteins embedded in them. This includes the proteins involved in fat oxidation and energy production. Omega-3s also have anti-inflammatory effects, which is important because metabolic transitions can create some oxidative stress. I recommend at least 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA per day. The fourth supplement, and this one's optional but can be really helpful, is exogenous ketones. These are different from MCT oil, though they serve a similar purpose. Exogenous ketones are actual ketone bodies, usually beta-hydroxybutyrate, that you consume directly. They raise your blood ketone levels immediately, within 20 to 30 minutes, and can provide a quick source of energy for your brain and muscles during the adaptation phase. Now, exogenous ketones are expensive, and you don't need them to get into ketosis. But if you're struggling with brain fog or low energy during the first few days, they can be a lifesaver. They're especially useful if you have a mentally demanding task or workout planned, and you need to perform well before you're fully adapted. Just be aware that they can cause digestive issues in some people. So start with a half dose to see how you tolerate them. The fifth supplement is alpha-lipoic acid, which is a powerful antioxidant that also improves insulin sensitivity. It helps your cells take up glucose more efficiently, which means you can clear any remaining glucose from your bloodstream faster, allowing insulin to drop more quickly. It also supports mitochondrial function by helping to regenerate other antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin E. A typical dose is 300 to 600 milligrams per day, taken with meals. And the sixth supplement, which is less commonly discussed but incredibly important, is carnitine. Specifically L-carnitine. Carnitine is responsible for shuttling fatty acids into your mitochondria, where they can be burned for energy. Think of it like a ferry that transports fat across the mitochondrial membrane. Without adequate carnitine, fatty acids pile up outside the mitochondria, and fat oxidation slows down dramatically. Your body can make some carnitine from amino acids, but during the high demand of transitioning into ketosis, supplementation can be beneficial. I recommend 500 to 1,000 milligrams of L-carnitine per day, taken in the morning or early afternoon, as it can be slightly stimulating. Step 6 is to optimize your sleep and manage stress, because both of these factors have a massive impact on how quickly and smoothly you transition into ketosis. This is something people often overlook because they're so focused on diet and exercise. But your hormonal environment is just as important as your macros. Let's talk about sleep first. When you're sleep deprived, your body releases more cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Cortisol raises blood sugar by promoting gluconeogenesis in the liver and by making your cells more insulin resistant. Both of these effects work against ketosis. High cortisol keeps blood sugar elevated, which keeps insulin elevated, which blocks fat burning and ketone production. Poor sleep also disrupts the hormones that regulate hunger and satiety, specifically leptin and ghrelin. This makes you hungrier and more likely to crave high-calorie foods, which can make sticking to your ketogenic diet much harder. During your transition into ketosis, you need to prioritize sleep more than ever. Aim for 7 to 9 hours per night, and focus on sleep quality, not just quantity. This means making your bedroom dark, cool, and quiet. It means avoiding screens for at least an hour before bed, because the blue light suppresses melatonin production. It means having a consistent sleep schedule, where you go to bed and wake up at roughly the same time every day, even on weekends. If you're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep during the keto transition, which is common in the first few days due to changes in neurotransmitters and hormones, that magnesium supplement I mentioned earlier can really help. You can also try some gentle relaxation techniques before bed, like deep breathing or light stretching. Just avoid intense exercise within 3 hours of bedtime, as it can be too stimulating. Now let's talk about stress management. Chronic stress creates the same hormonal environment as poor sleep, elevated cortisol, and insulin resistance. But stress also affects your food choices and your ability to stick with dietary changes. When you're stressed, your brain craves quick energy, which usually means sugar or simple carbs. Resisting these cravings while also dealing with the discomfort of transitioning into ketosis is really difficult. It's like trying to fight two battles at once. So during this transition period, do whatever you can to minimize stress. If possible, don't start your ketogenic diet during an especially stressful time at work or in your personal life. Wait for a relatively calm period. If that's not possible, then build in some stress management practices. This could be 10 minutes of meditation in the morning, a walk during your lunch break, some journaling in the evening, or any activity that helps you decompress. Exercise is actually one of the best stress management tools, and it has the added benefit of depleting glycogen and improving insulin sensitivity. So, it serves multiple purposes. One specific technique I recommend is breath work, particularly something called box breathing. It's simple. You breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts. Breathe out for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and repeat this cycle for 5 to 10 minutes. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest mode, and it lowers cortisol levels almost immediately. You can do this anytime you feel stressed or overwhelmed. Step 7, and this is the final step, is to measure your ketones and glucose to track your progress and make adjustments if needed. A lot of people skip this step because they don't want to spend money on a ketone meter, or they think it's unnecessary. But I'm telling you, having objective data about what's happening in your body is incredibly valuable. It takes the guesswork out of ketosis and lets you know definitively whether what you're doing is working. There are 3 ways to measure ketones, and each has pros and cons. The first is urine test strips, which measure acetoacetate, one of the 3 ketone bodies. These are cheap and easy to use, but they're not very accurate, especially after you've been in ketosis for a while. In the beginning, when you first enter ketosis, your body produces more ketones than it uses, and the excess spills into your urine. This is what the strips detect. But as you become more fat adapted, Your body gets better at utilizing ketones and less spills into the urine. So your strips might show lower readings even though you're actually deeper into ketosis. For this reason, I only recommend urine strips for the first week or two, just to confirm you've entered ketosis initially. The second method is breath ketone meters, which measure acetone, another ketone body that's excreted through your breath. These are more accurate than urine strips and they're reusable. So you buy the meter once and then you can test as often as you want without buying additional supplies. The downside is that breath meters can be affected by hydration status and recent meals, so readings can be variable. But they're still useful for tracking trends over time. If you want a non-invasive way to monitor ketosis without ongoing costs, a breath meter is a good option. The third method, and the gold standard, is blood ketone meters. These measure beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the primary ketone body circulating in your blood and the most accurate indicator of your ketone levels. Blood meters work just like blood glucose meters. You prick your finger with a lancet, put a drop of blood on a test strip, and get your reading within seconds. The downside is that the test strips are expensive, usually around $1 to $3 per strip, but the accuracy is unbeatable. If you're serious about tracking your ketosis, a blood meter is worth the investment. For glucose, you can use the same blood meter that measures ketones. Many meters measure both. Tracking glucose is important because it gives you insight into your insulin levels indirectly. If your fasting glucose is staying elevated above 90 or 95, that suggests insulin is still relatively high, and you might need to adjust your approach. As you become fat adapted, you should see your fasting glucose drop into the 70s or 80s. There's also a really useful metric called the glucose ketone index, or GKI, which is your blood glucose in milligrams per deciliter divided by your blood ketones in millimolar, and then divided by 18. Don't worry if that sounds complicated. There are calculators online that do this for you. The GKI gives you a single number that indicates your metabolic state. A GKI of 9 or higher means you're not in ketosis. A GKI of 3 to 9 means you're in nutritional ketosis. A GKI of 1 to 3 means you're in therapeutic levels of ketosis, which is used for certain medical conditions. For general health and weight loss, you're aiming for a GKI in the 3 to 9 range, with lower being deeper ketosis. I recommend measuring your ketones and glucose in the morning, before you eat or drink anything except water. This gives you your fasting baseline. Do this every day for the first week. Then you can reduce to every few days once you're confident you're maintaining ketosis. If your ketones are consistently above 0.5 millimolar, you're in ketosis. Above 1.5 is considered optimal for most people. Above 3 is very deep ketosis and isn't necessary unless you're using ketosis for a specific therapeutic purpose. If you find that your ketones aren't rising as expected after 3 or 4 days of following all these steps, that's when you need to troubleshoot. The most common issues are eating too much protein, not being strict enough with carb intake, hidden carbs in foods or supplements, or underlying insulin resistance that needs more time to improve. But with the strategies I've outlined, especially the glycogen depletion and time-restricted eating, most people will see measurable ketones within 48 to 72 hours. Now, I want to address something really important that a lot of people struggle with during this transition. The mental and emotional aspects of changing your diet this dramatically. It's not just a physical challenge. It's a psychological one too. You're dealing with cravings, with social pressure, with deeply ingrained habits around food, and with the discomfort of change. All of this is happening while your body is going through a major metabolic shift, and you might not be feeling your best physically. First, understand that cravings for carbs and sugar during the first few days are completely normal. Your brain has been running on glucose your entire life. It's what it knows. It's what it's comfortable with. When you suddenly cut off that fuel source, your brain sends out distress signals in the form of cravings. It's essentially saying, "Hey, where's my usual fuel? I need glucose right now." But here's the key thing to understand. These cravings are temporary. They're most intense in the first 72 hours, and they diminish rapidly once your brain starts getting adequate ketones for fuel. The way to handle these cravings is not through willpower alone, although you do need some of that. The more effective strategy is to replace the glucose your brain is craving with ketones. This is where the MCT oil and exogenous ketones I mentioned earlier become really valuable. When a carb craving hits, instead of trying to white-knuckle through it, have a tablespoon of MCT oil in some coffee or tea, or take a serving of exogenous ketones. Within 30 minutes, your blood ketone levels will rise. Your brain will have the fuel it needs, and the craving will subside. You're not fighting your biology. You're working with it. Another psychological hurdle is the social aspect of eating. We live in a carb-centric food culture. Bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, desserts, these are everywhere. They're at every social gathering, every restaurant, every celebration. When you start a ketogenic diet, you have to navigate all of these situations while sticking to your plan, and you'll probably face questions or comments from friends and family who don't understand what you're doing or why. My advice is to have a simple, confident explanation ready. Something like, "I'm trying a lower carb approach to improve my energy and metabolic health." You don't need to get into a debate about ketosis or defend your choices. Most people will accept a brief explanation and move on. For social situations involving food, plan ahead. Eat a ketogenic meal before you go to an event so you're not hungry and tempted by the carb-heavy options. Or if it's a restaurant, look at the menu online beforehand and identify what you can order. Most restaurants can accommodate low-carb requests, like substituting vegetables for potatoes or having a burger without the bun. The other emotional challenge is dealing with the keto flu, if you experience it despite all these strategies to minimize it. Some people will still have a day or two where they feel tired, irritable, or foggy-headed. If this happens to you, remember that it's temporary. It's your body going through an adjustment period, not a sign that something is wrong or that the diet isn't right for you. Rest more if you need to. Scale back on intense activities for a couple days. Increase your electrolytes and hydration. And remind yourself why you're doing this. What's your goal? Better energy, weight loss, improved health markers, mental clarity. Keep that goal in mind when things get tough. It can also help to connect with other people who are going through or have gone through the same transition. There are online communities, forums, and social media groups dedicated to ketogenic diets where people share their experiences and support each other. Seeing that others have faced the same challenges and come out the other side successfully can be incredibly motivating. You're not alone in this. One more thing I want to mention about the psychological aspect is the temptation to be too rigid or perfectionistic with this process. Some people get so focused on hitting exact macro numbers or achieving a specific ketone level that they create unnecessary stress for themselves. They obsess over every gram of carbs. They panic if their ketones drop slightly. They feel like they've failed if they accidentally eat something that wasn't perfectly ketogenic. This mindset is counterproductive and can actually work against your goals because stress raises cortisol, which, as I explained earlier, interferes with ketosis. So, while it's important to be consistent and intentional with your diet during this transition period, also give yourself some grace. If you accidentally have a few extra grams of carbs one day, it's not the end of the world. Just get back on track with your next meal. If your ketones aren't quite as high as you wanted them to be, but you're feeling good and seeing progress, that's what matters. The goal is not perfection. It's consistency and overall improvement. Focus on the trend, not individual data points. Now let's talk about what happens after you've successfully entered ketosis. You've followed all these steps, you've been measuring your ketones, and you're consistently showing ketone levels above 0.5 or ideally above 1. Congratulations, you're in ketosis. But this is just the beginning. Being in ketosis and being fat adapted are two different things. Ketosis means your body is producing ketones. Fat adaptation means your body is efficiently using those ketones and has fully shifted its metabolic machinery to prioritize fat metabolism. This deeper adaptation takes longer, usually 2 to 4 weeks. During this fat adaptation phase, you might still experience some fluctuations in energy levels or mental performance. Some days you'll feel great. Other days you might feel just okay. This is normal, as your body continues to upregulate the enzymes and mitochondrial processes needed for optimal fat burning. The strategies I've outlined will get you into ketosis quickly, but the full benefits of a ketogenic diet, the stable energy, the mental clarity, the effortless appetite control, these emerge more fully as you become fat adapted. To accelerate fat adaptation, continue with most of the strategies from the initial transition. Keep your carbs low, maintain adequate protein, get plenty of healthy fats, stay consistent with time-restricted eating if it's working for you, prioritize sleep and stress management, and consider continuing with MCT oil and the key supplements like magnesium and omega-3s. You can back off on the exogenous ketones once you're producing sufficient ketones on your own, as they're mainly helpful during the initial transition when endogenous production is still ramping up. Exercise is particularly important during the fat adaptation phase. Both aerobic exercise and resistance training send strong signals to your body that it needs to optimize fat metabolism. Aerobic exercise increases the number and efficiency of mitochondria in your muscles, a process called mitochondrial biogenesis. More mitochondria means more capacity to burn fat and produce energy from ketones. Resistance training preserves and builds muscle mass, which increases your metabolic rate and improves insulin sensitivity. Aim for at least 3 to 4 exercise sessions per week during this phase. One common mistake people make once they're in ketosis is thinking they can relax on the carb restriction and still maintain ketosis. While it's true that some people can tolerate slightly higher carb intake and stay in ketosis once they're fully adapted, usually somewhere between 30 and 50 grams per day instead of 20, you need to be careful not to push this too far too soon. If you increase carbs too quickly or too much before you're fully adapted, you'll kick yourself out of ketosis and have to go through the transition process again. It's much better to stay strict for at least the first month. Fully establish your fat adaptation and then carefully experiment with your carb tolerance if you want to. Another consideration as you progress with a ketogenic diet is nutrient density. When you're restricting entire food groups, like grains, fruits, and starchy vegetables, you need to make sure you're getting all the vitamins and minerals your body needs from the foods you are eating. This means prioritizing nutrient-dense whole foods over processed keto products. Focus on things like fatty fish, organ meats if you can tolerate them, leafy greens and low-carb vegetables, nuts and seeds, eggs, and high-quality dairy if you tolerate it. These foods provide not just macros, but also the micronutrients that support overall health. There's a tendency in the keto community to focus heavily on hitting your fat macro, often through added fats like butter, oil, and cream. And while these fats are important for providing energy and keeping you satiated, don't forget about the protein and vegetable components of your meals. You need protein for the reasons I outlined earlier, and you need vegetables for fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. A well-formulated ketogenic diet includes all of these components, not just fat. Let me also address some common misconceptions and mistakes that can derail your progress or make the transition harder than it needs to be. The first misconception is that you need to eat extremely high amounts of fat, like 80 or 90% of your calories from fat, to be in ketosis. This isn't true. The amount of fat you need depends on your goals. If you're trying to lose weight, you want your body to burn stored body fat for energy, which means you don't need to eat as much dietary fat. If you're trying to maintain weight, or if you're very active and need more calories, then yes, you'll eat more fat. But the key to ketosis is keeping carbs low and protein moderate, not necessarily eating massive amounts of fat. The second misconception is that all keto-friendly foods are healthy. There are a lot of processed, low-carb products on the market now. Keto bars, keto cookies, keto ice cream, and so on. These products might fit your macros, but they're often made with artificial sweeteners, processed oils, and other ingredients that aren't optimal for health. They can also trigger cravings and make it harder to stick with whole food eating. I'm not saying never have these foods, but they shouldn't be the foundation of your diet. Treat them as occasional convenience foods, not daily staples. The third misconception is that you can't eat any carbs at all on a ketogenic diet. While it's true that carbs need to be low, usually under 20 to 30 grams per day to maintain ketosis, you can and should get these carbs from nutrient-dense sources like leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, avocados, and small amounts of berries. These foods provide valuable nutrients and fiber without significantly impacting ketosis. The carbs to avoid are the refined and processed ones, sugars, grains, and starchy vegetables. But green vegetables are not your enemy. The fourth mistake is not drinking enough water. As your body depletes glycogen and excretes sodium, you lose a lot of water. If you don't replace this water, you'll become dehydrated, which makes all the symptoms of the keto flu worse. Aim for at least 8 to 10 glasses of water per day, more if you're active or live in a hot climate. You can also include herbal teas, mineral water, or other non-caloric beverages. Just avoid anything with added sugar or artificial sweeteners that might spike insulin or trigger cravings. The fifth mistake is comparing your progress to others. Everyone's metabolism is different. Your coworker might enter ketosis in 2 days while it takes you 4. Your friend might lose 10 pounds in the first week while you lose 3. This doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong or that the diet isn't working for you. It just means your body is responding at its own pace. Focus on your own experience and your own progress. Are your ketones rising? Are your symptoms improving? Are you starting to feel better? These are the metrics that matter, not how you compare to someone else. Let me give you some practical meal ideas to make this transition easier. For breakfast, if you're doing time-restricted eating and skipping breakfast, you'd have nothing except black coffee or tea. But if you are eating breakfast, or if this is your first meal of the day at noon, something like scrambled eggs cooked in butter with avocado and sautéed spinach works great. Or a smoothie made with unsweetened almond milk, protein powder, spinach, avocado, and a tablespoon of MCT oil, or full-fat Greek yogurt with a handful of nuts and a few berries. These meals are high in fat, moderate in protein, and very low in carbs. For lunch or dinner, think protein and vegetables with added fat. Grilled salmon with roasted broccoli, and a side salad dressed with olive oil and vinegar. Chicken thighs, cooked with butter, served over cauliflower rice, with a generous portion of sautéed mushrooms and asparagus. A big salad with mixed greens, cucumber, cherry tomatoes, grilled steak or chicken, avocado, cheese, and a creamy dressing made with olive oil or avocado oil. Bunless burger with cheese and bacon, served with a side of roasted Brussels sprouts. These meals are satisfying, nutritious, and perfectly aligned with ketogenic macros. For snacks, if you need them between meals, things like a handful of macadamia nuts or almonds, celery with almond butter, cheese cubes or cheese crisps, hard-boiled eggs, or olives are all good options. But honestly, once you're deeper into ketosis and more fat adapted, you might find that you don't need snacks as much because your appetite naturally decreases and you can go longer between meals without feeling hungry. One thing I want to emphasize is meals simplicity, especially during this transition period. You don't need elaborate recipes or complicated meal prep. Simple combinations of quality protein, healthy fats, and low-carb vegetables are perfectly fine. Don't create unnecessary stress by thinking you need to cook gourmet keto meals every day. Save the more complex recipes for when you're feeling better and more established in your routine. I also want to talk about what to do if you slip up or have a cheat meal during this transition period. First, don't panic and don't beat yourself up. One high-carb meal won't undo all your progress, but it will likely kick you out of ketosis temporarily. Your blood sugar and insulin will spike. You'll retain some water, and your ketone levels will drop. But this is reversible. The key is to get right back on track with your next meal. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, well, I already messed up, so I might as well keep eating carbs for the rest of the day or the rest of the weekend. That mindset turns a small setback into a major one. Instead, acknowledge that you had a high-carb meal, accept that it happened, and move forward. Your next meal should be a clean ketogenic meal. You might want to do a fasted workout the next morning to help deplete the glycogen you just consumed and accelerate your return to ketosis. You can also increase your MCT oil intake for a day or two to help boost ketones while your body gets back on track. Most people can get back into ketosis within 24 to 48 hours after a slip-up, especially if they're already fat adapted. That said, I don't recommend planned cheat meals during the first 3 to 4 weeks of a ketogenic diet. Your body needs consistent, low-carb eating during this time to fully adapt its metabolic machinery. Once you're solidly fat adapted, occasional higher carb meals are more tolerable and less disruptive. But during the transition phase, stay as consistent as possible. Let's also discuss some of the positive changes you should expect to see as you progress through this transition. The first and most obvious is weight loss. Most people lose several pounds in the first week, primarily water weight, as glycogen and sodium are depleted. Don't be discouraged when this initial rapid loss slows down. After the first week, you'll settle into a steadier pace of fat loss, typically 1 to 2 pounds per week if you're in a caloric deficit. Some people lose faster, some slower. Be patient and focus on the trend over weeks and months, not day-to-day fluctuations. The second change is appetite suppression. As ketones rise and fat adaptation progresses, you'll notice that you're simply not as hungry as you used to be. The constant cravings and urges to snack that you might have experienced on a high-carb diet start to fade. This is one of the most liberating aspects of ketosis. You're no longer a slave to your appetite. You can go hours without eating and feel perfectly fine. This makes time-restricted eating and even extended fasting much easier. The third change is stable energy levels. On a high-carb diet, your energy tends to fluctuate with your blood sugar. You eat. You feel energized. A few hours later, your blood sugar crashes and you feel tired and sluggish. So you eat again. It's a roller coaster. On a ketogenic diet, once you're fat adapted, your energy becomes much more stable throughout the day because you're running on a constant supply of fat and ketones rather than fluctuating glucose. You don't experience those afternoon crashes or the desperate need for a mid-morning snack. The fourth change is mental clarity. Many people report that their thinking becomes sharper and clearer on a ketogenic diet. Brain fog lifts, concentration improves, and cognitive performance enhances. This is partly because ketones are an efficient fuel source for the brain, and partly because you're no longer experiencing the blood sugar fluctuations that can impair cognitive function. Some people describe this as feeling like a mental haze has been lifted. The fifth change is improved markers of metabolic health. If you have your blood work done before starting a ketogenic diet, and then again after a few months, you'll likely see improvements in several markers. Triglycerides typically drop significantly. HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, usually increases. Blood pressure often decreases. Fasting blood sugar and insulin levels improve. These changes reflect improved metabolic function and reduced disease risk. Now, I do need to mention that there can be some individual variation in how a ketogenic diet affects certain blood markers, particularly LDL cholesterol. Some people see their LDL go down, some see it stay the same, and some see it increase. This is a complex topic that depends on factors like genetics, the types of fats you're eating, and how your body responds to dietary changes. If you're concerned about your cholesterol on a ketogenic diet, work with a healthcare provider who understands lipidology and can interpret your results in the context of advanced markers like particle size and number, not just standard cholesterol numbers. Before I wrap this up, I want to give you one final piece of advice that might be the most important of all. Be patient with yourself and with the process. Metabolic change takes time. You didn't develop insulin resistance or metabolic dysfunction overnight, and you won't reverse it overnight either. The strategies I've given you will help you enter ketosis quickly, but the full transformation of becoming a fat-burning machine, someone who easily maintains ketosis and experiences all the benefits it offers, that takes weeks to months of consistent effort. There will be challenges along the way. There will be days when you don't feel great, meals that don't satisfy you as much as you hoped, social situations that are awkward to navigate, and moments when you question whether this is worth it. In those moments, remember why you started. Remember the health goals you're working toward, and remember that every single day of following a ketogenic diet is building your metabolic flexibility and moving you closer to those goals. It's also okay to adjust your approach as you learn what works for your body. The guidelines I've given you are based on science and clinical experience, but you're an individual with unique needs and responses. If something isn't working for you, troubleshoot it. Maybe you need more protein than I suggested. Maybe you do better with a longer eating window. Maybe certain types of fats don't agree with your digestion. Pay attention to how you feel and make adjustments accordingly. And finally, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Yes, there's science involved, and yes, there are strategies to optimize the process. But at its core, a ketogenic diet is simple. Eat mostly fat and protein. Keep carbs very low. Avoid processed junk, and give your body time to adapt. You don't need fancy supplements or expensive meal plans or complicated tracking systems, though these things can help. You just need consistency, patience, and a willingness to let your body do what it's designed to do, which is burn fat for fuel. I hope this guide has given you a clear roadmap for getting into ketosis quickly and effectively, while minimizing the discomfort that often comes with this transition. If you implement these 7 steps, glycogen depletion, MCT oil, strategic fasting, proper protein intake, targeted supplements, sleep and stress management, and ketone monitoring, you'll be well on your way to experiencing the benefits of a ketogenic lifestyle. If you found this helpful and you want to learn more about optimizing your metabolic health, I recently put out a video on how to break through a weight loss plateau on keto that dives deep into the hormonal and metabolic factors that can stall your progress even when you're doing everything right. I'll link to that in the description. The strategies in that video complement what we've discussed today and can help you continue making progress once you're established in ketosis. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.